You are not hiding, yet they see more than you ever intended to reveal. Every gesture, every pause has been cataloged, measured, and quietly assessed. They believed they understood the surface, the predictable patterns, the behaviors that could be anticipated and contained. But something slipped through, something precise and unspoken, and now it unsettles them. You move with a rhythm they cannot predict, an awareness that bends their expectations without effort or display. They expected compliance, an easy read, a familiar mark. Instead, they encounter a presence that reflects them, silently, without apology or explanation. And in that reflection, their certainty wavers. You have become a question they were never prepared to answer, a quiet force that exposes what they overlooked. The tension is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it is absolute. The first moment of awareness is almost imperceptible. A subtle glance, a pause before response, a calm, measured step in a room brimming with tension. In these small gestures, the observer emerges, and the observed falters. Hierarchies built on aggression or performance begin to blur when someone demonstrates composure that does not seek validation. It is not an act of defiance, but a quiet shift in energy, a signal that the usual rules no longer apply. Others feel it instinctively, uncertainty creeping into the edges of confidence, hesitation where certainty once lived. The world, which prizes noise as evidence of power, fails to recognize the force of restraint until it has already begun to shape behavior around it. Power resides not in what is displayed, but in what remains unseen. By simply observing, by holding a quiet presence, one can turn scrutiny back onto those who wield it indiscriminately. The shift is subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone except the one who has learned to notice. They begin to speak louder, gesture more aggressively, attempt to reclaim space, yet each effort meets an invisible resistance, a calm that does not yield. It is the tension of the unshakable, a psychological edge born of clarity and patience rather than volume. To be underestimated is a rare gift. It allows space to examine, to move with discretion, to anticipate reactions without revealing intent. Those around you act according to their assumptions, their projections, their need to assert. And while they scramble to maintain a sense of dominance, you are already adapting, responding, shaping the room with minimal movement. Influence manifests quietly, often unrecognized. Yet the effect is inevitable. People bend toward perception without knowing why, align with insight they cannot articulate, and reveal weaknesses that noise could never extract. There is a strange satisfaction in the silent mirror you hold. It does not hum with pride or urgency, it simply reflects. Every glance, every pause, every composed response becomes a tool, not of manipulation, but of observation. Others may attempt to disrupt it, to provoke, to force recognition, yet the quiet mastery endures. Composure is its own language, understood unconsciously by those who believe they control the narrative. And in that understanding, influence becomes effortless, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. By the end, the lesson is not loud. It is not a demonstration. It is the realization that those who underestimate you have handed you their reactions as if on a silver plate, unaware that they are now performing within the frame you silently hold, and in that frame the mirror persists, still, precise, unassailable. People often assume they understand what they see. They project, classify, and measure, rarely aware that their judgments reveal their inner world more than yours. The assumptions of others settle like dust, everybody's gaze carrying weight, yet weight that exists entirely outside your control. Awareness begins when you observe this as an external phenomenon. The desire to respond, to correct, to justify, slowly fades. You start to notice the subtle power embedded in recognition by understanding their perception. You no longer react blindly. Instead, you move with a sense of agency that feels imperceptible, almost invisible. The world continues to measure, to categorize, and yet its measures no longer anchor you. There is an internal friction that accompanies this realization. A part of you longs to conform, to align with the expectations that feel comfortable or socially sanctioned. Another part resists, drawn toward authenticity, toward expression that is quietly uncompromising. This tension is not an obstacle but a lens. Each expectation you encounter illuminates the contours of your own identity, what is borrowed, what is chosen, what persists beneath influence. When you recognize the pull of conformity without surrendering to it, you perceive the subtle ways social leverage operates. The observer projects desire, fear, or expectation, and in doing so exposes their own vulnerabilities. By witnessing without collapsing, by understanding the mechanics of their assumptions, you inhabit a space of quiet authority. Power here is not loud. It is the stillness that remains when the weight of others' judgments slides off, leaving clarity in its place. Understanding perception in this way transforms ordinary encounters into intricate psychological exchanges. Each moment carries layers of subtle influence: a colleague's impatience, a friend's curiosity, a stranger's glance. Awareness allows you to see beyond the apparent, to sense the currents that attempt to guide behavior without announcing themselves. The friction between adaptation and authenticity ceases to be a source of anxiety. It becomes a form of intelligence, an observation of cause and effect within human behavior. You no longer inhabit the same gravitational pull as those around you. You see their momentum and remain poised, untethered. And so the weight of perception is revealed as a construct, an interplay of projection, expectation, and silent influence. It is neither judgment nor truth, but a lever of control that exists outside your essence. Recognition dissolves the compulsion to conform, while understanding illuminates the quiet architectures of social influence. What once pressed down now hovers, noticeable but impotent. You move through the world with awareness as your companion, observing the unseen forces, feeling their presence without allowing them to anchor you. The tension between expectation and authenticity does not vanish, it sharpens, offering clarity instead of constraint. In the stillness of this awareness, something subtle settles. The world continues to measure, classify, and assume, but you inhabit a space unclaimed by perception. Your identity is neither defended nor declared. It simply exists, deliberate and intact, held steady against the pull of external judgments. There is a quiet authority here, a clarity that does not demand recognition, and as you carry it forward, the unseen weight of perception no longer bends you, it defines nothing, yet reveals everything. Stillness has a shape. It is not a passive absence, but an active, moving force that exposes tension in others. In its presence, performative chaos, the flurry of gestures, the insistence of noise, the constant need to be seen becomes starkly apparent. Those accustomed to filling every silence with movement find their instincts disrupted, their strategies exposed. The calm does not respond in kind, does not compete for attention, and does not react. It waits. anchored, observing the subtle shifts in posture, the involuntary tightening of hands, the unsteady rhythm of breaths. To witness such presence is to feel a quiet challenge, a reflection of one's own unrest mirrored back without judgment, leaving only the raw, unadorned measure of control versus instinct. Mastery of self manifests most clearly not in what is done, but in what is withheld. The individual who can maintain composure while the world performs its theatrics exerts a subtle dominance, not through coercion, but through perception. Every word spoken, every movement made, becomes a statement not of force, but of inevitability. The observer senses it before the conscious mind can define it, an authority that requires no declaration. Here lies the paradox. Control over one's internal landscape is also control over the impressions others form, yet it demands nothing of them. It is a quiet leverage, precise and exacting, invisible until it shifts the balance. Chaos and order are not opposites, but mirrors of perception. Where the external world thrives on distraction, internal order does not merely survive, it shapes. The restrained mind does not flinch at provocation, nor does it seek to dominate through visible aggression. Instead, it harnesses tension, letting others expend themselves against their own anticipation. In this space, the calm is a weapon, more exact than anger, more enduring than spectacle. It does not announce its impact, but it leaves traces in gestures left unchecked, in moments of silence suddenly amplified, in the subtle hesitation of those who cannot mirror its certainty. Restraint carries a weight that cannot be quantified, yet it is immediately felt. People are drawn to it, repelled by it, and often both at once. They sense that beneath the quiet surface lies a comprehension of forces they cannot articulate, a mastery that does not need display. This presence transforms interactions into studies of contrast, motion against stillness, urgency against deliberation, noise against absence. And within this tension, a subtle psychological shift occurs, one that cannot be taught but only observed, the realization that the most profound influence is exerted without visible effort. In the end, there is no statement, no conclusion. The room, the moment, the observer, everything remains in a state of poised suspension. And yet within that suspension, clarity emerges. The quiet presence does not seek to resolve, persuade, or perform. It simply exists, leaving a trace in the mind that lingers longer than any act of force ever could. The calm that unsettles does not shout, it endures. And in its endurance, it carries a truth, both simple and profound. Mastery begins inward, and its resonance quietly outlasts the clamor it never needed to confront. Authenticity, when fully realized, carries an invisible weight. It does not demand recognition, nor does it seek to impress, yet it becomes undeniable. The presence of someone who moves in exact alignment with their inner self unmasks the pretense around them. Those who rely on manipulation or dominance are often the first to flinch us around them, not because they understand what is happening, but because they sense the impossibility of controlling someone who requires no validation. The quiet integrity of being, the refusal to conform to the expectations of others, exposes the fragility that performance can temporarily hide. It is in the silence between words, the measured restraint in expression, that true authority asserts itself, not through loudness, but through unshakable consistency. Beneath human behavior lies a subtle economy of perception and fear. People instinctively detect when someone's self-possession is unshakable, and the reaction is rarely admiration. It is tension, suspicion, even unease. Power, in its truest form, does not seek to dominate. It simply exists. And when it does, it provokes a response in those who cannot understand it. They attempt to fill the void with noise, with manipulation, or with illusions of control. Yet nothing can alter the quiet fact that being fully yourself is inherently destabilizing to anyone who has built their sense of security on the fragility of others. There is a philosophical shift embedded in this dynamic. The deeper you move into self-mastery, the less there is to reveal superficially, and paradoxically, the more is revealed inherently. It is not a conscious act of revelation. It is the nature of authenticity itself. When you no longer bend to expectation, when your choices are dictated not by fear or desire for approval, the world around you begins to betray its own inconsistencies. The cracks that were once hidden behind charm, coercion, or spectacle appear unavoidably. And in witnessing them, others encounter an unsettling mirror of their own insecurities, though the truth has not been spoken aloud. This confrontation is internal before it is external. The fear that surfaces is rarely about you directly. It is about the recognition that someone can exist entirely on their own terms, requiring nothing, conceding nothing, and still remain fundamentally untouched. In these moments, it becomes clear that respect is a conditional currency. Fear is far more honest. The disquiet that rises in those around you is not a judgment of character. It is an acknowledgement of a reality they cannot control and cannot contain. And yet the unsettling clarity does not belong solely to them. You feel it too. There is a stillness, a quiet tension, a recognition that mastery is not celebrated universally. The moments of isolation, of subtle resistance, of silent observation, they are not failures, but markers of a deeper truth. Life in its most refined state does not provide applause for composure. It simply allows presence to exist, and in doing so, illuminates what others have ignored. The truth they ignored was never yours to declare. It was always there, inherent in your being, waiting for recognition not from the world but from yourself. And when you feel the stillness settle, when the echoes of unease around you fade to a quiet hum, there is a clarity that endures. The cracks, the fears, the unspoken reactions, none of it diminishes your presence. Instead, it confirms what you have always known, that true self-possession is both invisible and inescapable, quiet yet inevitable, and entirely beyond the reach of those who depend on shadows to define reality.